Hi everyone, welcome to Inspire Nation. I'm Michael Salmon, best-selling author and your host on Inspire Nation. Check out our website where we'll be posting podcasts, tips, videos, blogs, and more at inspirenationshow.com. Today we have a very tantric guest on our show. His name is Marc Allen, and he's the co-founder and publisher of New World Library. He's also the author of several books, including Tantra for the West, The Magical Path, The Greatest Secret of all, Visionary Business, and others. He's internationally renowned seminar leader, entrepreneur, author, and composer. He co-founded New World Library with Shakti Gawain and has guided the company as president and publisher from a small startup to its current position as a major player in the independent publishing world. He leads seminars in Northern California and gives teleseminars that reach people all over the world. Personally, I've just finished reading Tantra for the West, Marc's latest book, and I was happily surprised to find it's not so much a deep study of Tantra, which would encompass a giant library of books, but a beautiful how-to guide to living the life of your dreams. And it's filled with guided meditations, something that are near and dear to my heart. Of course, since it's about Tantra, there's also a discussion of sex, and why not? Of course, there's also talk of donuts, but more on that in a minute. So now let's talk with Marc about freedom, happiness, love, relationships, food, money, sex, and of course, Tantra. Welcome to the show, Marc. Are you ready to shine?
Thank you, Michael. I hope I'm shining all the time. I hope you are.
Excellent. And a giant woohoo!
Woohoo! Sounds great.
As we dive into things, a lot of us have heard of Tantra, but honestly have no clue, myself in the past included, what in the world is Tantra?
Yes, good question. Because most people in the West, and it kind of cracks me up that this is a fact, but if they've heard of Tantra, they think of sex. It's something to do with sex with some kind of mystical element. That's the typical understanding of Tantra in the West. But if you go to the East to study where the word came from, in India and Tibet, the path of Tantra really is much broader than that. It's a whole huge broad path which I've summarized as really the yoga of every moment, or the practice of every moment of your life. For almost 4 years I studied Tibetan Buddhism, and they call that Tantric Buddhism. It's the path of Tantra. And I finally grasped that what they meant was every moment, everything we do is part of our practice.
So this is in a sense like mindfulness, but it's almost like mindfulness to infinity.
Kind of, yeah. Every thought, even the worst, every feeling, every situation, it's all part of our practice. That's Tantra. My Tibetan Lama that I studied with for about 4 years here in California, Berkeley, California, but he once summarized it in a real clear story where he said, we're all on a path that goes up the mountain. And across our path, patches of poison grow. And he said in Tibetan, the word for poison is the same as the word for so-called negative emotions: anger, fear, envy, jealousy, greed. They're poisons. And maybe they really do literally poison our body, maybe. But poison grows across the path for each of us on our way up the mountain. And he said, there's different types of people on different paths. The monk or the nun comes up the path. They see the poison, and they immediately head in the other direction. And he said that's the perfect path for them, for the monk or nun, to immediately avoid, deny, go the other way. Then the awakening being comes up the path, and immediately just plows right through the poison and goes on up the path to awakening. That's the path of the bodhisattva, or the awakening being. Then the tantric practitioner, and by that he meant too anybody studying with him, anybody studying Tibetan Buddhism or Tantra from India, comes up the path, sees the poison, and immediately goes off the path into the center of the poison.
Dives right in.
Dives right into the center of that. Well, what does he mean? He means every emotion that arises, everything that happens, if we get deeply into it, that's our path. That's the path of Tantra. You get deeply into every moment of your life.
So this seems like it's a theme that's come up a lot because it seems that people who are successful, happy, joyous, whatever label we want to put on it, they don't tend to run from their fears, but I don't know if the word is embrace it, and it may be, but they dive right into them and face them head on.
Yes, and I think embrace is a good word for it. Yes, it's embracing it, it's diving into it, it's accepting it without resisting it. We come to realize it's not the fear itself or the anxiety itself, whatever it is, it's our resistance to it that creates the problem. So if we just really accept what is, oh, I'm going through this anxiety right now, or oh, I have this frustration right now, whatever it is, if we just accept it, that really helps to completely transform it. And the other secret key, the other great key that he gave us all, is actually very scientific. In fact, Einstein even said the teachings of Buddhism hold up completely scientifically because there's nothing to believe, but you just take in the words and test it in your own experience. Those were even Buddha's last words to his disciples. He said, don't believe anything I said.
I love that.
Test it in your own experience and make sure it's true for you. So the Lama said that, the path of Tantra, it involves this awareness, the awareness, and it's a simple concept, but if we get it, it can be totally transforming. And it is amazingly simple. All he says is everything, every object, every feeling, everything has an outer and an inner and a secret level of being. Say our bodies, for example.
Yes, okay.
We know the outer level. That's very easy. We're a certain height, certain weight, certain hair color. Inner level. Once we get deeply into the inner level, the secret is revealed. Okay, on the inner level, well, we have all these organs, muscles, blood, bone. What's inside that? We get more deeply into it. Well, it's all a bunch of cells, like 1 trillion cells or something in a typical body. Okay, let's get into that. What's in the cells? Well, we get down to molecules. What's in the molecules? We start getting to the secret, which scientists have discovered in the last century. I often thought 200 years ago, 500 years ago, when people heard these teachings, they sure seemed unrealistic. But now science has proven them, because when you get into the inner level deep enough, you get to the secret level. You realize we're composed of all these molecules, atoms. What are the atoms composed of? Emptiness.
Nothing.
Buddhists have chanted for 2,500 years, form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. And that's the great secret. Everything changes. Everything will pass. Everything is empty. This is the great awakening of the Buddha, as one poem put it. So once you get into the secret level of anything, it dissolves. And that includes every feeling. So if we get into our anger and really get into the inside of it, why are we angry? Well, it's based on fear. What's that fear arising? What is that fear? We go into any fear deeply enough, and it starts changing. One typical afternoon at the Tibetan Center, he took us down into the basement, and all of us sat around in a big circle, and he said, okay, imagine your mother has just died, and she's laying in the center of this circle. How do you feel? Most of us were early or mid-20s. Most of us had parents that were vital and healthy. We'd never thought about it. We spent 3-4 hours going into grief, getting into it. And he said, get into it. Okay, the outer grief we see, it's tears. The inner grief, what is that? It's this emotion, this feeling of loss, of even abandonment of something. Get in more deeply into that. What is that? That emotion is a movement of energy in our body. And you get more and more deeply into that, and then the secrets become revealed for you. And those secrets aren't something other people can tell you. They're things you have to find out yourself. So me telling you what I found isn't fair. But I will tell you what I found, and that is that all grief, all negative emotion is a result of love. We would never grieve someone for someone if we didn't love them. And that love is all there is, really.
I love it. It sounds funny to say I love it. I was thinking of a recent move that we had to make, and I was chatting with you off air how my wife and I, particularly my wife, had gotten really sick at our last home, and I didn't know what was going on, and it really, in a sense, brought us to our knees. And I'm saying, don't want to have to move, don't want to have to move, don't want to have to move. This beautiful home on Maui. Don't want to have to move. Yeah, well, you can see what's coming.
Yes, yes.
We're in New Jersey now. We're healing. We're getting strong again. And what I resisted, persisted, or what I focused on, don't want to have to move, is what came about. But what's interesting is I felt, and it was so silly because I'm down this path myself. I felt afraid, fear of making this giant move. For us to heal. And yet when the move was made, it was silliness. It was nonsensical. The only thing, I mean, we've all heard the quote, there's nothing to fear but fear itself. And that just dissolved. There was nothing there.
Yes, yes.
And so I like this. If you go down that rabbit hole, you don't even need to experience the death of that loved one. But like you're saying, experience it in that moment. You burn through the layers.
Yes, yes, and then it passes. It passes quickly. I knew a therapist once who would do something he called consciousness focusing, where he would find a person who had a headache.
Yes.
And he would have them close their eyes and absolutely describe where that headache was. He would get them focusing on the headache rather than resisting it.
Their headache didn't stand a
Most
chance.
of us, our normal reaction to a headache, or with me for years, to dentist pain, the pain at dentistry. I had a lot of it in my youth, and it hurt. And I resisted it. I did not like it. I found once I just got into it, it completely changed. It wasn't pain at all. It's like electricity through my body. And the same with a headache. This guy would have a person focus on their headache. He'd ask over and over, where is it exactly? What shape of it is it? Does it have a color? What does it feel like? Does it have an energy? And after 5 minutes or so, and I saw him do this many times, it starts to shift. If they're focusing on it and not rejecting it, it starts to shift and change and become less substantial. And after 10 minutes or so, it starts evaporating. And usually after 15 minutes, it's gone. By focusing on something and really getting into it, it changes. So that the great teaching of Tantra really is, things have an outer, inner, and secret level. And if you get into the inner level deep enough, it will get into the great secret of our existence, which is a wonderful, powerful experience of awakening.
It makes the real not real, and that which does not appear to be real
Yeah, is
perfectly
the
real. I've had many broken bones, for lack of a better term, in my life. And many years ago, I was having knee surgery, and I was allergic to anesthetics. They couldn't give me a general anesthetic that wouldn't make me deathly ill for at least 24 hours. And so I was meditating, how to practice at the time, and I asked the doctor the crazy question. I said, can we do it without anesthetic? And he said, nobody's done that before. And I said, well, here's what my practice is. I think I'll be fine. And he said, well, it's up to you. And I said, let's go for it. And it was a knee operation. I've actually done 2 operations this way. Second one didn't go nearly as well. But the first one, the first one was a knee operation. The second was sinuses. And going up into the head is a little more challenging. But that knee operation, past the first cut, which is sort of like having your finger pricked to have your blood glucose checked. It's not a big deal. Past that first cut, I felt into it, and it was a pressure because there's no actual pain nerves deep inside the knee. And so there was just this pressure. And so I focused on that for a little bit until basically I got bored of the sensation. And then it melted away. And
That's it.
I finished surgery. They had a sandwich waiting for me. And I basically hopped off the table. I'm like, that was so much better.
You were doing what that therapist would call consciousness focusing then. You weren't resisting it. You were focusing on it. You were getting into it, seeing what is this experience. It changes everything. It really does.
I'll be darned. It worked. It worked. So talking about ways that we can create positive situations. You talk a lot in the book about the power of affirmations.
Yes, yes. I think when I spent several years after my 4 years at this Tibetan center reflecting on all this stuff. I knew that teacher had powerful, powerful teachings to give us, and yet I knew he was a long way still from adapting them to America, to our culture, to us, to me in particular. And I kept thinking of all of his chanting we did, we chanted these mantras over and over and over. We did 100,000 prostrations chanting a mantra. And then we did this Om Mani Padme Hum about the jewel in the bliss of lotusness, the jewel of bliss in the lotus of consciousness. See, I can't even translate it well. Something about a jewel of bliss in the lotus of consciousness.
Well, it sounds good.
Yeah. And I finally realized, these words, he's talking about the power of words to transform.
In the beginning, there was the word.
It's the word, yes. Words have creative power. Even our thoughts are words. Okay, so the words we say are extremely important. Words have power. And that's where I started changing these words into English and looking around at writers in English traditions that talk about affirmations. And found if you chant instead of Om Mani Padme Hum, if you tell yourself in an easy and relaxed manner, in a healthy and positive way, I am now creating whatever it is you want to create. Or if in relationship, if you tell yourself something like, my relationship is filled with grace, ease, and lightness. It's something I did. It changes everything. Those affirmations are incredibly powerful. For work, if you do something like, I do wonderful work in a wonderful way with wonderful people for wonderful pay. I've seen story after story of people that have used words like that and have had amazing experiences. So the second chapter of the book, Tantra for the West, is all about affirmations. In the first, I just introduced the concept of Tantra, the practice of every moment of our lives. And then in the second, I say, this has been the single most vitally powerful thing for me is affirmations in my life. They have changed my life.
There's one in particular I really like, and that is, my connection with infinite intelligence is now bringing me wonderful abundance every day.
Oh, that's a great one. Yes, it's a great one. They're very personal. We need to find the words that really work for us. But my connection with infinite intelligence, that's a wonderful image. And bringing abundance every day, yes, we can really summon abundance in our lives with very simple affirmations.
So what is your affirmation and thank you exercise?
Well, I start every day by just wandering out and thanking the universe for something. And then listening for guidance. And then finding some, just affirmation through the day is, I think, the single most powerful tool I have to just have. I sometimes feel like I have a tool belt that I carry around with me, and it has all these affirmations in it, and all these. It has just an attitude of gratitude in there too. It's a tool belt, a spiritual tool belt.
Well, I think it's like you're carrying a bag of I don't know what the word is today, but in the past you would have like a notary seal, a stamp, and you're putting
Yes,
a
yes,
stamp on everything.
right, yes, yes. And then you bring out each tool when you need it. And oh, there's difficulty in my relationship.
Hmm.
Ah, what's the tool? Oh, yes, I'm affirming my relationship is filled with grace, ease, and lightness. Grace, ease,
Mm.
and lightness dissolve all problems in relationship. At least for me, that's a powerful affirmation.
Well,
Some people might not be able to use those words at all, but you need to find other words. But they can find other words.
let's jump into that. Let's jump from affirmations into tantric relationships.
Yes, yes, yes. Every moment of our lives is part of our practice. So, of course, that includes relationships.
Hmm.
For almost all of us, relationships are such a vitally important part of our lives. So, that becomes our path, the relationship every moment. That other person is, you can look at them as mirroring your level of consciousness.
Yeah.
If you're arguing with them, if you're frustrated, they're mirroring things within you that you need to look at and you can look at and get into. Get into the inner part of it, get into yourself. A successful relationship does not depend on that other person at all. Any relationship you have doesn't depend on that other person. We think it does, but they don't need to change. We need to change. And it can boil down to just finding that right affirmation to say in the moment, and the all the
Hmm.
problems will dissipate. If
It's
not, I also have an argument settling technique that
but
works as well.
before we jump into that, it's something that I've watched a lot of spiritual people say that, oh, this isn't the right person or this isn't the right relationship because in the right relationship, it'll be all blissful and joyous and there'll be no problems. There'll be harps playing. And I'm like, no, man, you found your teacher.
Yes, yes, that's it. You have found your teacher. Yes, our best teacher.
Hmm.
And with that person, we can make it work. With that person, we that's our best practice.
Hmm.
I'm convinced a person who's aware enough can make a relationship work with anybody. Now,
Yeah.
you may not want to continue that relationship. That's fine. That's okay too. But if you want to continue the relationship, you can make it work because it's not about them, it's about you.
So what is then, you mentioned that there's an argument affirmation, or in your book, you actually talk about negotiations.
Right, right. I have a simple, it's an argument settling technique
Okay.
that I learned from a therapist that it's very simple. You can even do it with people who don't know you're doing it. But the
Ooh.
best way, the easiest way to explain it is hopefully you and your partner both have been through the technique and both uh, understand the principles.
Hmm.
Because all it is, it's just a few simple steps. When you're in an argument,
Yeah.
that's when you need it, of course. The first step is just stop arguing.
I like
Realize that arguments
it.
nowhere, arguments never solve anything.
Mhm.
No one in the history of humanity has ever said in the middle of an argument, you know, I changed my mind. You're right. I agree with you. No one says that because if you're arguing, you're already frustrated and upset. You're not listening and you're not being heard.
Mhm.
And so the argument just fuels itself and gets worse and worse. So, step one, stop.
Yep.
Step two, it's so simple. It's simple to say, it's really challenging to do,
Mhm.
but you can do it. You say to the other person, okay, look, this argument's getting us nowhere. I'm going to listen to you, and I'm not going to interrupt you. You go on, you say whatever you want, and I will not deny it. I will
Mhm.
not defend myself.
Mhm.
I will not beat myself up or you up. I will just listen and take it in, and I will not interrupt. And you let that person say whatever they want without interrupting. I've seen this, and I've done this in workshops literally now hundreds of times over the years. I've never seen a person go on longer than 2 or 3 minutes. That's all it takes. Then when they're done, you say, okay, I listen to you without interrupting. Now I ask you to listen to me without interrupting.
Yeah.
You'll get a chance to respond to everything you want. Just listen to me without interrupting, and then you have your time, and it won't take over more than 2 minutes. 2 or 3 minutes is it. Then you have another round of that. And after 2 or 3 rounds, back and forth of talking without interrupting, you inevitably get to a place where, first of all, the anger is dissipated,
Yeah.
and you're talking to each other, and then you can literally come to the real question at the bottom of the argument, which is, what do you want from me? You each ask the other person what they want from you. Why are you arguing? You want something. What is it? And you just listen. By that time, you're listening without interrupting. You could just say simply what you want. And it is simple, inevitably. And then the last step is you negotiate. You figure out how you can give them what they want. Or you tell them you can't give them what you want. But you work it out. You negotiate. That works to dissolve arguments.
I love it, because oftentimes it seems to me the most important thing is an argument isn't the other person wanting to be right, but wanting to be heard.
Often that's it. What I want from you, I want you to just listen to me, and you're doing it right now.
Yeah.
So that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yes.
So let's switch gears, since this is a book on Tantra.
Yes, yes.
Let's dive into the sex chapter. And sex is really, it's an incredibly charged word. But the question to me is, have we lost the meaning behind what sex really is?
Well, I don't think so. We always have an incredible experience in sex. It's an amazing awakening experience. Just regular sex with regular people with no awareness of anything spiritual. It's all the same. It takes energy from your lower energy centers, your sexual centers. It moves them up your spine. It opens your heart. It opens your heart. And once your heart opens, all the higher energy centers open, and you finally, literally, you blow your mind. You have that moment of union with the whole universe. Sometimes I say, even atheists are saying, "Oh God," whatever it is. It's a wonderful experience. It's a wonderful gift, you could say, from God, from the universe, that each of us has been given. And it's a wonderful pathway to have sex, and then to really try to retain as much as you can of that wonderful peak experience you had.
It sounds again like you're not trying to. It's interesting. I think you mentioned it in the book by Eckart Tolle. Don't let meditation get in the way of your meditation. In this case, be present, but don't be so present that you're not being present.
Yes. That's well put.
So, as men, I've read a little bit about sexual alchemy, about transmutation, about Taoist philosophy in regards to sex. As men, how do we sustain that sexual energy so that we can? It's not like we're trying to be a 24-hour tantric experience here.
Right. But there are all kinds of options. One is to not try to retain anything and just have your experience, and then try to remember that peak experience. That's a wonderful path of just remembering peak experiences. I just heard this neuroscientist, Rick Johnson, was it? I forget his name, a real common last name. Rick Johnson. Anyway, a neuroscientist I heard, who said the same exact thing, but used all these very scientific reasons to explain why it works. Basically, if we just remember our peak experiences more often, just remembering them fills us with wonderful things all throughout our body, and it elevates our consciousness.
To
So
use scientific terms, NLP, it's bringing us back, that programming is bringing us back to that state that you're describing.
right, exactly. It's the same thing. So it's wonderful to have sex however long it takes, and then lay there and really try to stay with it as long as possible. There are all these practices some people do, and you can do of withholding. You can do that, and it's amazing. I've just done that a few times in my life. It's amazing, but I like to just have sex in its own regular way, and then use that as a spiritual pathway in just remembering the inner peace that follows, and staying in that aura of inner peace.
That special space.
Yes.
So now from there, talking about special space, you have a section in the book talking about being alone and how that's one of the scariest things in the world for people. How is being alone perceived from a tantric point of view?
I remember hearing a poll of millions of people, and being alone was right up there among most people's top fears. And I was shocked because I was alone a lot as a kid, and continue that into my adult years, where to me being alone is essential. It's fulfilling. It's a time of rejuvenation. It's completely necessary, and I love my alone times. I am married, and my wife is very good about giving me a lot of time. I have all my mornings.
Mm-hmm.
I have every Sunday is family day, but every Monday is completely my alone day.
Ooh.
I don't work. I have no plans.
It's a time for Mark.
It's a time for Mark, and it's very restful and relaxing.
So let's shift gears from there. You mentioned a very beautiful practice. In fact, I think we were talking about it off air before we began. A practice of seeing the beauty in everyone.
Yes.
And that's very powerful.
It's very powerful. Somebody describes some awakening being just saying, well, he sees the divine in everyone. And he sees the rest of it as all illusion. We really are divine. We really are incredibly beautiful, wonderful, miraculous creations.
Woohoo!
Yes, even Einstein said that. He said, famously, there's two ways of looking at the world. One is as if there are no miracles.
Mm-hmm.
The other is as if everything is a miracle. And he said, I choose the latter.
Yeah.
Yes, we're miracles. Just the fact that we have 1 trillion cells working together in beautiful harmony. Just the fact that I can say these words, they're going through the air somehow, they're going through your ear canals into your brain, and you're understanding what I'm saying. That's a phenomenal, miraculous mystery.
It is. So I like to stay in that magic.
Yes.
So from here, one of the things in the book, it's another common theme that comes up, which is we really need to, I don't know, need's not the right word. We can go through life any way we desire, but it may be that we feel the most fulfilled if we discover our highest purpose. And you talk about ways to help us do that.
I think it's very valuable to reflect on purpose. Some people have trouble with that word and grapple with it, and I've sometimes said, okay, back it up, take it down a few notches. You can reflect first on, say, vocation. Vocation means calling. So I often have people just write in one paragraph, my vocation is, my calling is, I am called to this. And then, if these words But playing with this stuff, it's all about words, and it means such individual things to individual people. But somewhere in vocation or mission or purpose are some very valuable guiding words for all of us. So if we just take a sheet of paper and reflect on our either vocation, our calling, or our mission, do we sense a mission in life? Do we have some reason for being here? We can grapple with these things, do we have a reason for being? It can get very deep and complex and metaphysical and all. But I think in a very simple way, I like to keep things simple. The older I get, the simpler I see things, and the simpler truths can be expressed. I think we do all have some kind of vocation or calling that comes from within us, and that's related in some way to a mission. We do all have certain gifts we've been given, and we've been given those gifts to fulfill them in some kind of mission or some kind of purpose.
I like to say we all came here with gifts that are gift wrapped around our heart.
Oh,
and
yes.
It's our job to open up, discover our gifts.
Yes. It all ends up with heart. You're right. It all ends up with love. That is the essential end of it all. Ramana Maharshi, maybe the greatest teacher of the 20th century in India, said so famously and so beautifully, I think this is the best single sentence I've ever heard. He said, the end of all wisdom is love, love, love. If your teachings don't end in love, if your religion doesn't end in love, if your philosophy doesn't end in love, it's not worthwhile. And go get a better one that ends in love, love, love.
It sounds so woo-woo, but at the end of the day, what else is there?
Yes, right. It's ultimate purpose. I think our purpose in some way is to evolve. We're evolving creatures, so our purpose is to keep growing, keep evolving, keep moving up into higher and higher levels of consciousness, if you will. And that means taking all our fears and transmuting them into love.
So now, you personally, it's been, I've read just a little bit about your bio of your path, seen you in another interview that gives a little backstory to it. You have been both spiritual and highly successful. Something that a lot of people say don't go hand in hand. They have real challenges with money and spirituality. So how did you get to this point of spirituality and abundance, and then what suggestions do you give to others?
Those are wonderful questions, because I did grapple with that for years. I really tried in my 20s to be just on a spiritual path. It was in the 70s I saw the movie Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon that came out about St. Francis. I saw it 7 times, and I really tried to be like St. Francis and have nothing to do with money. Money corrupts, of course. Money is the root of all evil. And actually, the original quote is, the love of money, or loving it too much, causes all the problems. But I really then grappled with this as I dared dream my ideal. I did a little game the day I turned 30 of imagining my ideal life in 5 years. And much to my amazement, it was, I have a successful publishing company, and I write books, and I record my music, and then doubts and fears just rushed in. It's way too much. And I realized the 2 critical things in life are, 1, daring to dream your dream, and then dealing with the doubts and then dealing with the doubts and fears that inevitably arise from that. And I grappled for years. Okay, here I'm trying to be spiritual, but I'm trying to be a successful business person. Can I bring them together? And I reflected on that a lot, and I know the words of Christ really helped me. He said, ask and you shall receive.
That's powerful.
And I remember grappling with that and realizing the power and simplicity of that. Ask and you shall receive. That's all he said. He didn't say ask and you shall receive if you deserve it, or if you work hard enough, or if you're talented enough, or lucky enough, or spiritual enough, or whatever. No, there were no conditions. Ask and you shall receive. So I literally started praying for more abundance in my life. I also reflected, Jesus also said it's harder for a rope to go through the eye of a needle, which is probably the accurate translation rather than instead of a camel, than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. As I've gotten richer and richer, I've often reflected on that too and thought, it's true. As you get richer and richer, more and more wealth accumulates. What they say in Prayer of Jabez, your property, your whole territory expands. Well, then you become caretaker of that territory. I now have 2 big houses and an office building and all this stuff. And you can start having to maintain that stuff so much.
It has a weight to it.
It has a weight, and it can take you off your path. It can make you forget what's important this moment of life. So yes, it is very careful as you become more abundant and more successful. You have to be careful not to let it take all your consciousness at all. So it's more challenging for a rich man to enter the kingdom because the kingdom is within us. But we only find it when we let everything go. We let it all go. We're not concerned with our buildings falling apart or whatever, all those concerns, what the stock market is doing. We're not concerned about that to really find fulfillment and peace in life.
I like that. I have a friend who's a billionaire and beautiful, beautiful human being, very spiritual, but he's facing that exact challenge you're describing.
Yes.
It's very, very heavy, which makes it hard to go within.
Right. Jesus was exactly right there.
So what is the cool theory?
Oh, my cool theory, yes, is, I came up with this in my 20s somewhere, but we all really do what we really think is cool. And we are what we really think is cool. On some level, anyway, the drunken bum in the gutter really thinks it's cool to be a drunken bum. He's a drunk, he's a rebel. He's a rebel with a cause. He's doing what he thinks is cool. We all do what we think is cool. We really try hard to be cool. So it's important to look at what we think is cool.
And important on that note, who we surround ourselves with, who we think are cool people.
Yes.
So I was given a book a few years back by my best friend, and he was our best man at the wedding at 89 years young. And
wonderful.
He gave us a book, The Richest Man in Babylon. And you have a section in the book that details exactly what the richest man in Babylon did, which is the 10% plan.
Yes. That was an excellent plan. Yes, when I started my company, I started to make some money. It was so simple. I think I read Richest Man in Babylon, and right then I just set up 3 bank accounts.
Yeah.
That's all. And I called one my savings account and one my donation account and then my regular account. And every bit of money that came in, I'd put into my regular account, and then I'd take 10% of that, and I'd always round up, but at least 10%, and I put in my savings, and at least 10% and put in my donation. In a very quick time, so many people have struggled with this, saying, they can't live on 80%. There's a trick called lowering the gradient. Okay, if you can't do 10% to each, do 5% to each. If you can't do that, do 3. If you can't do, you can do 1. You can save $1 for every 100 that flows through your hands. Come on, you can do that. You can save and donate $1 each. Okay, then you start building and building up to your 10%, and you find after a short while you can easily live on 80% of your income and save 10% or more. And as you grow in more abundance, bigger chunks come in, and you can save. Sometimes I save 50% of a particularly large check that I didn't expect or something.
I like that you said that early on, and this has happened with us. You put the money aside, and then the big expense comes, and then you go and you steal it right back from yourself.
Right, right.
And so you came up with a creative solution to a workaround for that.
What did I do? Remind me that this.
Another 10%.
Oh yes, right. The another 10%. Yes, for large expenses account. That's
Mhm.
right. I set up a large expenses account. It's been so long since I've had to do any of this that I even forget. But yeah, that was helpful. So
Mhm.
I'd come in, I'd save 70, I'd live on 70%,
Yep.
and I'd save 10% for savings, 10% for large unexpected expenses like new tires for the car or whatever happened, and 10% for donation.
So for us who are working our way up, who are trying to find a way to get more abundance in our lives, how do we go about that? You say, ask and you shall receive, but can you give
Yes.
a little more to that?
I remember when I was a total poverty case,
Hmm.
having dinner with one of the few rich couples I'd met.
Hmm.
It was my friend Shakti Gawain and I. We were on a spiritual path and we were poverty cases. And we met this other wonderful couple. They had us over to their house for dinner. He'd retired in his 30s and
Oh,
had a
wow.
beautiful house in the mountains. And he kicked back after dinner and he said, "You know, we're kind of like you in a way, only you're scrounging for your next $100 and we scrounge for our next 10,000 or 20,000." And this was back in the 70s, so he was saying you're scrounging for your next 200, 300. We're scrounging for our next 50,000. And I went away. That was my koan. Oh, do I just need to add a few zeros to what
Mm.
I want? Just add a few zeros? And I found that to be true. Think expansive. Don't dream too small. As one millionaire told my cousin went to a party on a billionaire's yacht or
Yep.
whatever he was. He was walking around in a bathrobe with a martini. She went up to him and said, "What's your secret of success?"
Yep.
And he just looked at her and said, "Don't dream too small." And
Ooh.
when I heard that, I remember thinking, okay, add some zeros. Rather than scrounging for 100,
Mhm.
scrounge for 10,000, 100,000, a million. Expand your thinking. And it works. It is amazing. You know, the movie The Secret had it down. All of these teachers, they're all teaching what is very true. You know, it all works. Positive thinking works. Creative visualization works. The only problem is negative thinking works.
That's
So,
exactly where I was going to go.
you know,
You were talking about that in your book.
yes, when we hear something, when we get inspired, when we affirm, "I'm going to create the life of my dreams," the whole universe supports us in a mysterious way. I think it's our subconscious mind is infinitely powerful and says yes to every thought. So when we say, "I'm going to live the life of my dreams," it says yes. However, if our next thought is, "Oh, but it's so hard to succeed, so few people succeed," the universe says, "Yes, it's hard with you with that thought, yes." That's the whole process. I'm convinced. It
I
works.
keep.
I've become a multimillionaire and I'm from a total poverty case. And I've just done it by expanding my thinking. I added zeros to what I needed, and I ended up getting things with many more zeros on the checks.
I love it. Whenever I have opened this book up before, I don't know why, before this interview, I kept on coming to a part that I didn't feel so much is me, but it just kept opening into it, and it has to do with this exact section, which is I kept opening up to the inner critic and fear of failure. And it seems like that is a massive stopping block where you say, you go, well, I want to bring in $1,000, and you don't. I think the trick is you say I want to bring in $1,000, and then, like you're saying, put a couple zeros in it. All of a sudden, somebody either feels guilty or they're afraid of it. What does
Yes,
that mean? And they put
yes,
up this massive barrier.
right. Yeah, a very powerful barrier. Yeah, I sometimes think dealing with our inner critic and our fears of failure, it's so simple now. I see it so simple. That's the essential thing. It's You first dare to dream. You got to dream. That's essential. Then you just have to deal with the inevitable fears and doubts that come up. And you can deal with them. Tantra for the West is filled with tons of techniques. My last book, too, The Magical Path, is just another way of putting the same stuff. In a way, every one of my books is the same, but using different words. Visionary Business is for the business mind. The Millionaire Course is more for the practical, grounded person. The Magical Path is for the person that loves that word magic. Tantra for the West is for the person maybe that's open to teachings from the East, or open to new wild concepts, or loves the idea of that their sexuality might be part of their whole spiritual path and might help them lead to success. But it all boils down to something very, very simple. Two things are essential. Dare to dream, dare to go for it. Don't let that fear of failure undermine it. So that's the only other essential thing. Learn how to deal effectively with all those doubts and fears that inevitably arise. Let them go. Go through them, go past them. Don't fear failure. Every successful person I've known, including myself, has had a lot of failures along the way. But it doesn't matter. It's not a failure. It's just another stepping stone on your inevitable path for success, if you just don't let failure stop you.
I want to highlight that. On your inevitable path of success.
Yes. And it is inevitable. If you dare to dream and keep going for it, you'll get there. Or you'll get to some wonderful place. If your goal is being a billionaire rock star, for example, you may not become a billionaire rock star, but you'll become something wonderful and amazing if you just really dare to dream and really go for it.
I love it. Woo! So, on this path, you consider creativity extremely important.
Yes.
Why is that?
Once you start dealing with your doubts and fears, what happens with everyone is your heart opens. Once you start doing what you love, your creativity naturally just opens and expands. It's our fear of failure that keeps us real limited and small, and for a lot of people frustrated and at a low level of income. If we can let that failure go, not fear failure, there's nothing to fear, go for it, go. Then our creativity just naturally opens up. We give ourselves permission. Every child is incredibly creative.
Oh, yeah.
And we have that creative child still within us. It's just we have that inner critic and that fear of failure telling that child to be quiet. Just, no, let's have that child play again and have fun and be creative. We're all amazed. Every day I'm just amazed at the creativity of everybody, and what all these different people do around me. It's amazing.
So before I wrap up with a few quick wrap-up questions, I want to dive real briefly in the introduction. I mentioned donuts.
Yes.
So I'm thinking your donut experiment, plus I'm thinking your vegetarian period and your Tibetan teacher. What can you share with us real briefly about food?
About food, yes. I opened my chapter on food with a poem from the 8th century Chinese Buddhist literature called the Shodoka, where it says, "Release your hold on earth, air, water, wind. Eat and drink as you wish in the Buddha mind. All things are empty and all things will change. This is the great enlightenment of the Buddha. Eat and drink as you wish." Now, in moderation, Buddha also said in moderation makes sense.
A middle path.
Right. So my middle path certainly includes donuts. For my Tibetan Lama, it included real greasy meat. He loved momos, he called them. He'd have a big wok. He'd start with a bunch of garlic and ginger, which is great. He'd fry that all up. Then he'd just put hamburger in there, fry it in there. Then he'd roll out white flour and put globs of hamburger in white flour and deep fry it. So it's just
fried on fried.
He loved them. And when certain people that we worked at this press, Dharma Press in Berkeley, and he worked students so hard, sometimes they would just be on the verge of collapsing. And he'd always say, okay, his remedy was have 7 momos and go to bed. All this greasy meat and go to bed. I do think it's not so much what we consume, but it's what we tell ourselves, and the quantity, everything in moderation, and eat and drink as you wish, but tell yourself we have wonderful healing power within.
Well, it's interesting because people are often, and I've been in this camp myself, afraid of their food. We're an ism. We're a vegetarianism. We're a veganism. We're a raw food. We're this. We're that. And then we take that food that we're scared of, and if we eat it, it is poison. However, if we take that food and say, this is love. This is God made.
Yes.
This donut is the greatest thing on earth.
Floppy donut every once in a while, and I love it. I love it. I had a friend who was such a pure food fanatic. I remember a friend of mine dated her, and we went out to a dinner together. We tried to have a dinner. We went to a Chinese restaurant. She looked at the menu and said, I can't eat anything here. So we had to go across. We found a Japanese restaurant where she just had grilled vegetables, no oil. Well, she died of breast cancer in her mid-30s. And I cannot help thinking that cancer was directly connected with all the fear she had around food and drink and everything else, the contaminants. She lived in a constant state of fear. She could only eat grilled vegetables with no oil. And she dies of cancer. I can't help thinking the two are related, that it's the fear that's the problem. Eat and drink as you wish. It's wonderful to eat good, healthy food. It makes your body feel good. That's great. If you want a gloppy donut, if you want it, have it. That's my theory. I love my gloppy donut on occasion. And maybe I have one a month or something, you know.
I'll let you in on a secret. While it is exceptionally rare that I would go buy myself a donut, though I may think about the donut, I was gifted last night with some donuts from my wife, and I ate them.
Good for you.
And I was going, woohoo! Because at that point it's a treat. How can I turn it down?
Yes. So every once in a while, you know.
Yeah.
Eat and drink as you wish. Definitely.
Jessica's the producer of the show. She always likes me to ask if there are any words of wisdom for parents with little kids or infants or little ones just coming into this world.
I always tell parents, and I had the blessings to be a parent, but do try your best to just treasure every moment. Every moment is such a precious, beautiful thing. Giving life to another person and watching that person grow is such an amazing, miraculous experience. Don't miss the miracles. Be there as much as you can and love every moment. Love even the tough stuff. That's kind of the essence of Tantra for the West. Even the hard things, even the kids' little traumas or something, there's beauty and wonder in it. In our darkest moments, our brightest treasures can be found. Is a phrase from the book.
And so true. What are 3 key takeaway pieces of advice you would give people?
I always encourage people, dare to dream. Dare to dream your ideal and go for it in any way you can. And then deal with the doubts and fears that inevitably come up. And there's ways to do that. Don't fear failure. Don't fear anything. Do not fear. Have no fear. At certain times, fear will naturally arrive, and at certain times, it's very good. Like if we ever meet a saber-toothed tiger, it's great to have fear because we will want to be full of adrenaline and we'll want to run. Okay, at those few times in our life, fear is a wonderful, wonderful thing. The rest of the time, let it go. Let it go. Be at peace.
I just posted on the Facebook page yesterday, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail?
Yes, what a great question. That's a great question to ask.
And that's letting go of fear.
Yes.
So that's number one. What would number two be?
Oh, number two is we're all on a wonderful spiritual path. We are all evolving beings. And the culmination of that path is absolute awakening and enlightenment and fulfillment and inner peace. And then number three is we realize that's not a distant goal. It's what every teacher says. It's just realizing who and what we are.
I love it. Well, thank you. I have one last question that I asked all of our guests, which is what brings you the greatest happiness, or what I call the woohoo factor?
You know, all of these things we've talked about, all of these techniques and words, to me, I've been on a path to find a real inner peace. Where I wake up in the morning, I'm at peace with what is. I go through my day, I'm at peace. That is, for me, the most wonderful thing to keep remembering. And I know I would like to end with a little prayer I came up with my son when I was putting him to bed when we were little. When he was little, I was littler, but as I'd put him to bed, I would just say to him, starting when he was very young, say, we close our eyes and see a field of light, and we feel that light and life in every cell of our body, nurturing and healing every cell. And we know that light and life and love is who and what we are, now and forever.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, Mark.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. For everyone out there, this is Michael Sandler saying, be well, have fun, create the life that you desire, and shine bright. Woohoo! Thank you, Mark.
Oh, thank you, Michael. I love that woohoo you do.
Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like below. Also, leave your comments. Have some real fun with it. Subscribe to our channel where you're going to get more great videos, more interviews coming up. And check out our website, inspirationshow.com. That's where you'll find tips, blogs, information, videos you won't find anywhere else, and useful and helpful resources to really help you kickstart your life and to shine bright. Thanks so much again. Thank you for your support. Like, comment, subscribe. See the website. Thanks so much and have fun. Of course, shine bright. Woohoo!